everyone, my name is Crystal Tish. I'm the Training and Behavior Manager at the Blue Ridge Humane Society. I am standing in my dining room in my home in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Today I want to talk to you about how you can train your dog to walk nicely on a leash even when you're out hiking. One of the first things that I think you should do with leash walk training is to figure out, what does polite leash walking look like to you? So it's going to be different for everybody, but I think part of the problem is that we are not necessarily very consistent with our training, with what we're reinforcing and what we're allowing the dogs to get away with sometimes and then not other times. And I think this can be really confusing for dogs. So it's important to decide, this is what this behavior looks like to me, to help inform your training and decide what you're going to reinforce. So for me personally, polite leash walking is a dog that's not pulling my arm out of the socket. My arm's never straight out like this. I like a nice slack leash. Now I don't expect the dog to be a little robot that's constantly in a heel position. I just don't want them to be pulling me. I like it if they check in with me, so that's something I reinforce. And if they want to walk by my side, I think that's fantastic, but I'm not requiring it. I'm just requiring that the leash has slack in it. So it's going to be different for everybody, but you decide what it looks like for you. Next, we want to be sure that we are training inside the home. So we want to start in an environment that's got the least distractions possible so the dog can actually pay attention and learn. And we want to get as many repetitions in as possible before we start working in those more distracting environments. One of the things I see people running into a lot outside is that they can't get the correct behavior from the dog to reinforce. And I think a lot of times what's happening is that they haven't done enough practice inside the home where the dog can actually pay attention. Training requires a lot of repetitions. So really work your way around the house, and then as your dog is really doing very well, you can start to work outside the home, in your yards, and then maybe on your walks towards the end of the walk or a boring part of the walk. And then more and more on the walk, you can start asking for the behavior and be sure that you're reinforcing any of that behavior that is offered from your dog, like walking by your side or checking in with you. And then we can start asking the dog to work towards the end of the hike. And you see a pattern here. We're slowly starting to increase the level of distraction for the dog as they're able to pay attention. So it's important to remember that what leash walking training is, it's about teaching your dog where you want them to be and giving them a reason for wanting to be there. So I've got my black and tan Doberman Ludo. We are going to show you how to teach your dog a mark word. And a mark word is a word that we teach the dog to help isolate the correct behavior for them. The reason that we need a mark word is that dogs have an association period of 1 to 3 seconds. And 3 seconds is going to be your doggy Einstein. So pretty much your dog probably has a 1 second association period. And then to top it off, humans are inherently slow. We're 5 to 7 times slower than dogs. So those two things combined make it really hard for us to get the treat to the dog in time to create the association. So what we do is we use a mark word so that we can bridge the gap between the behavior and when we're able to finally get the treat into the dog's mouth. So what we do is we condition a word to mean that the dog's going to get a treat. And it's really easy to teach. All we do is we say the word and then we feed the dog a treat. And if you do that enough times, you will classically condition the dog to that word, meaning that they're going to get a treat. So what I usually like to do is use the dog's dinner. So I'll do this for a few times at the beginning of training, just so that they know what the word means. So I'll get their dinner and I'm just going to hold the food in my hand like this. I'm going to say yes, and then I'm going to move my hand to feed the treat. I like to put my hand up here because I don't want to be moving my hand at the same time as I'm saying the word yes. So for me, holding my hand up here by my shoulder in the beginning helps to remind me yes. I think of my arm as a lever, and when I say yes, it makes the lever go down. Yes. So the reason that I'm doing that is because I don't want to distract the dog with the movement of my hand. So try this with your dog. You want to start this exercise before you start your leash walking games to really get your dog creating that association. Okay, so we're going to show you one method of teaching leash walking. There's a ton of different ways to teach it. Just remember that the point is that you're supposed to teach the dog where you want them to be and then heavily reinforce them for being in the correct position. So this method, we start off with the dog in the correct position by our side and then just feed them several treats in a row for being in the correct position. Yes. 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 The next step is we're going to take one step and yes, and treat the dog for coming with me. Yes. Yes. So I would practice that walking around to the house. Just going to turn around here. The next step would be that you take 2 steps with the dog. Ludo. Yes. And then the next step would be 3 steps. So we're slowly, as the dog is successful, we're going to slowly increase the number of steps that we're taking. Yes. And then maybe what you can do is quickly change direction. Yes. You can change your speed. Anything to make it more interesting for the dog. But the point being that you are slowly increasing the amount of steps for the dog at a level which they can do and practicing different parts of the house and then start to practice outside. Okay, so we've got our training games to show our dogs how to walk correctly, but when you're out walking, it's likely that they're still going to be pulling. So what we want to be sure of is that we're not allowing them to pull because that reinforces the pulling behavior. So what are some things that we can do when they start pulling to respond to that? So what's going to work for you is going to depend on your dog. One technique people like to use is called the be a tree or be a rock. So say your dog is pulling you, you just stop moving dead in your tracks and just wait for the dog, yes, to turn back towards you and hold a treat out towards your leg. I will usually use a finish or something like that to get the dog to move into the correct position, and then we'll resume walking as soon as the dog is in the correct position. So another thing you can do is called the back and forth. So if the dog starts pulling you in this direction, turn and walk in this direction. And every time they start pulling you, just start walking in the opposite direction. A lot of times that change of direction gets their attention and gets them walking with you. So another thing you can do, which is similar to the back and forth, is to add an angle. So if my dog's pulling me, I can always just start walking in this direction. So I'll just walking at a completely different angle to the dog, and a lot of times that will get their attention. So the goal just being moving differently, not in the direction of the pulling, but either in a different direction or at a different angle to get them engaged back with being by your side. What works well for me is I usually just stop moving, call the dog back to me, get them by my side, and then we start walking for a little bit, and then I'll give them some treats. So try those techniques for when your dog actually does pull out on the walk. Let's recap our tips for training our dogs how to walk politely on leash. So first tip was that we should think about, why do dogs pull? What's reinforcing that behavior? Why do they continue to pull? Then we're asking ourselves, what does polite leash walking look like to me? That'll help us determine what it is we want to be reinforcing. Then we're being sure that we're always starting our training at home in a low distraction environment, and then slowly building the level of distractions as the dog is able to handle them. We're teaching our dogs our mark words so that we can help them to isolate the correct behavior, which will help them to learn faster. We're playing leash walking games with our dogs that slowly increase the amount of steps so that we're building on good behavior. And then as the dog is doing really well, we can start to change direction or change speed to keep up the dog's interest. And then when we're out and our dogs are pulling us, we're responding with things like a rock, back and forth, off at an angle, or my personal favorite, we're calling the dog back to our side by using their name. When the dog gets back to our side and the leash is slack, then we're resuming our walk. I really hope these tips are helpful for you in teaching your dog how to walk politely on leash. This is going to help you and your dog and everyone around you have a more enjoyable experience when you're out hiking. This video video is part of a series on hiking with your dog.